Thank you for coming, everyone. If you could introduce yourselves and give your opening statements. We'll start to my left.
My name is Malcolm Platt, and I'm running for 8th District Alderman. And I just wanted to tell you why I'm running. This is why I'm running. I'm human, I make mistakes. This is why I'm running, okay? I'm running because Racine was voted the 4th worst city for African Americans in the entire country. And I want to turn that around to make Racine at least the 4th best for all citizens, not only African Americans. Because Racine has had the highest or second highest unemployment rate for the last 2 decades. And I want to turn that around so that we have the lowest, or at least the second lowest unemployment rate for the next 2 decades and beyond. Okay, I run because Racine has had the highest incarceration rate for African American males in the state of Wisconsin. I'm raising an African American male, and I don't want him to become a statistic. That is why I'm running. To bring honesty and non-partisanship back to the 8th District and back to local politics here in the city of Racine. That's why I'm running. State statutes regulate that the major parties are not to be involved in local and county elected offices, and yet we see their handprints and fingerprints all over these things. And I want to make sure that that goes away so that the people can get direct access to their representatives, and the representatives are directly answerable to the people that they supposedly represent. As far as my opponent not making it here, I just want to tell you, I'm a single dad of 2 young children, okay? I made it here. I'm a single dad who could have used this as an excuse not to make it here, but I made it here. This is an example of what kind of representation you can expect from me if I'm elected to the 8th District Alderman post. Thank you.
Now, thank you so much, Mr. Platt. I do want to say that QA Shakoor did call and say that he would not be able to make it this evening. With that being said, you can't have a debate by yourself. So, as with Mr. Lumpkin, I'm going to push.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And push you shall.
Yes, that's right. Okay, Mr. Montey, go ahead.
Good evening. I want to say a thank you to the organizations that have come together to sponsor this event, and to the staff of the library for providing this space. I'll tell you a little something about myself. I'm a lifelong resident of the 4th District. I raised my family here, and I reside with my wife Sandy at 939 Marquette Street. Most of my working career was spent as an electrician with IBEW Local 430 in Racine. I advanced professionally to foreman and eventually to working superintendent, project coordinator, project manager, state licensed master electrician, and electrical contractor. I earned the respect of those I worked for and those who worked under me. From 1998 to 2002, I ran the lion's share of the remodel and expansion projects at St. Luke's and St. Mary's hospitals, including the North Building remodel, new surgical suites, cafeteria, kitchen, professional building, birthing center, the new fire alarm system, standing by for the Y2K, remodeling of the pharmacy, physical therapy, x-ray, sterile supplies, and the laboratory departments. And I was also in charge of the Northside Clinic and the dialysis locations. Skills and experience that will equip me to best serve the residents of my district. I've always been driven to excel at what I do. This history shows that I'm a can-do and get-it-done professional, and it has provided me with the knowledge of construction, management, contracts, budgets, and finances. As a contractor, I created jobs and gained repeated work from NAI MLG Property Management, Nelson Storage Systems located at Mitchell Field, Magnatech Corporation, and numerous other clients. I've knocked on over 600 doors, speaking with many residents and enjoying the hospitality of those who invited me into their homes. 3 top concerns that I've heard are failure of the incumbent to respond to their concerns and communications, high taxes combined with wasteful spending, and the preservation of city services without being nickel and dime through service fees for trash and recycling pickups. The residents of our district deserve and expect their voice to be heard. I pledge to do what is best for our district, what is good for Racine, and is right by my conscience. I will continue staying in touch with my neighbors and continue to regularly attend neighborhood watch meetings, never allowing special interests to override the wishes of my constituents.
Thank you. Tracey Larrin has not contacted us and said that there would be no attendance. With that being said, especially with that wonderful opening and all that corporate experience, I'm going to expect some complex answers, and I'm really going to push.
I'm looking forward to it.
All right. So, District 4 and District 8, shall we begin?
Yes, ma'am.
We will start here on the left. What leadership positions have you held that will help prepare you for this role should you be elected?
I am a quality assurance professional, and I'm on track to training as a quality engineer. So what we do is we make sure that all of the processes that we are responsible for, that quality is built into the processes, and that there are ways to engineer out errors and issues in the process. One of the things that we use, one of the tools at our disposal, is failure modes and effect analysis, as well as potential failure modes and effect analysis. And what this does is it equips us and it helps us to find out why something went wrong, why it will go wrong, and how to prevent that from going wrong in the future. That's the kind of experience that I have in the business world, in the working world, and that is what I would bring to the Common Council of the City of Racine. There are a lot of things that are going wrong, and the wrong questions are being asked about it. Instead of asking why something went wrong, how do we prevent this from happening again? A lot of times people say, these darn people here and we need to throw them out. And if you don't get the correct individuals in, if you don't have those processes and procedures in place to prevent that from happening again, you can take one person out and put another person in, and you'll get the same result. Garbage in, garbage out, because of the process.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, you already answered that question in your opening statement, so I'll ask you a similar question.
Could I expand on that?
Okay, let's go
Sure,
ahead.
and then please follow up. In addition to the management and leadership roles that I played in the industry, I spent 9 years as chairman of my congregation, 3 terms as a trustee, also secretary, and as an elder. President of the Racine Taxpayer Association, recently elected, and I was a financial secretary for IBW Local 430 and served as an alternate on the apprenticeship committee. And
Well, glad you said that, so now my question has changed. Since you've done all those things, it's 2-part. Give me 2 things that you're transferring from those roles into this elected position. What skills are 2 transferable skills? The second part of that question is, with those skills, how are you going to serve better than your opponent?
okay. Some of the transferable skills are, as a contractor, you must bid your work, you must create a budget, and you must stick to that budget. And that is certainly something that I have a very thorough understanding of, and I think it's something that the city once again needs to embrace, because City Hall has become a bloated monster of bureaucracy that is not serving the citizens well. Now, how would I apply that? I would apply it during the budget process. I would use my history of creating jobs to help us find a way to create jobs within the city of Racine, and to best analyze who the best people are for those jobs and what jobs are best for those people. I think the problem is that we've had pie-in-the-sky dreams, but we have not looked at who are the people that require the employment. We need to fit the jobs to the people, and we're not doing that. We have a huge workforce in the city of Racine, some trained, some untrained. The untrained are trainable. But we are not addressing what positions they can fill and then encouraging the development that would employ them.
Skill number 2.
Skill number 2, I am passionate. I have proven time and time again that I'm a can-do person. I'm a get-it-done person. I don't quit. And so I will stick by the people in my district. I will make sure that their issues are addressed. And I will follow through with each and every single one of them on their concerns and bringing their voice to the Common Council.
Thank you. Same question, since you're on track to be a quality engineer, same question, 2 transferable skills from engineering that will serve your role, serve your constituents better than your opponent would in this role.
Well, first and foremost, knowing what to look for when a problem presents itself, and understanding how to address the problem, fix the problem, and prevent the problem from popping up again. Two of those things again. Finding out what the problem is or how to find the problem, and then addressing the problem and making sure that the problem doesn't present itself again. Those are two transferable skills that will come with me to the Common Council if elected.
So you know what to look for.
In a word, yes.
Expand.
Okay. For instance, when we talk about jobs, we need jobs, we need jobs, we need jobs. Well, the first question that I want to ask is, well, why is it that we cannot attract jobs to the Racine area? Why is it that we had 250 world-renowned manufacturers in the 1970s at our peak, and now we have, what, a few here and there? Why has that happened? See, government does not have the power to create jobs. If anything, government has the power to destroy. The Supreme Court said the power to tax is the power to destroy. And so when you look at taxing, you see and you find the issue of destruction, especially in the private sector. And so that is what I would bring to the Common Council, removing not only this power, but this ability, this penchant to destroy companies, and excise that out and bring in policies and procedures that would lure companies and businesses in and want them to want to flourish. Low taxes, sensible regulations, leveling the playing field between all players, that is what attracts world-renowned manufacturers.
Thank you. So we're going to move to a couple more questions. I have some community questions here, and I also will open it up for people to raise their hands. So as they're answering and as they have been answering, be thinking, their opponents aren't here, help me press. Okay, so what's your top 1 or 2 issues that you want to address successfully when you're elected?
All right, the first one, and having been in business myself, this is very near and dear to my heart. We need to cut the red tape at City Hall. We have 15 pages of just the index to the regulations that are required of a business before they can open the door. They must not only deal with the building department, the health department, state codes, local codes. They have to deal with a city development department that picks and chooses which businesses are successful. And they do that by putting unnecessary burdens and costs on business owners until they either give up or they can no longer afford to stay in business. So I would work to eliminate much of this red tape so that we can cause businesses to flourish. The other thing is to move to reduce our taxes, and that is done by reducing our debt and our debt service. And then the nice trickle down from that is, when your taxes are lower, it's easier to encourage developers, whether they be business or residential, to come to our area. That's why they're fleeing to Mount Pleasant, that's why they're fleeing to Caledonia, because our taxes are too high.
Those are good issues. So the press is pressing in. That sounds really, really admirable. It does. It makes me feel hopeful. But you seem like a thinking person, an analytical person who thinks critically. And if those are your top issues, I'm certain that you have some type of rough sketch of a plan without actually being in the position and feeling all that comes with it. So give us some idea, because those are very lofty goals. But
Sure.
there has to be a plan in place for that. And I know you don't want to give away all your secrets, but you got to give us some.
Oh no, there's no secrets. You know, I love the city of Racine, and I want to see everybody have a level playing field, and I want to see everybody flourish in the city. You know, as Malcolm alluded to, we were the center of industry in the country because we had innovation here, because we had people who learned from businesses that they worked at and went into competition with their employers. Young Reed Eaters and Modines, Massey Harris and Case. I think the first thing we need to do is take a very careful look at those things that we can change. We can't change state codes. That has to be done at the state level. What we can do is, as the city development department, to look more critically at what requirements they are putting on businesses, how many of those are absolutely necessary, and how many of those requirements are just because, well, we think it would look nice.
Time.
Thank you. So, I am going to ask you the same question, Mr. Platt. Your top 2 issues. But before you answer, we're going to wait for that phone to stop. Perfect. Perfect timing. See how that worked out?
Top 2 issues. Number 1 is government transparency, accountability, and accessibility.
Transparency,
accountability, and accessibility. As you can see, the one who represents the government is not here, not accessible, not accountable, at least in this meeting, and there's no possibility for him to be transparent because he's not here. That's one of the top issues that I will attack when I am elected Alderman of the 8th District. I will make sure that I am accountable, accessible, and transparent to all of my constituents about any and every one of their concerns. My second thing that I would, my second concern would be finding out creative ways to lower the tax burden as well as increase the services that people receive from the taxes that they pay. They shouldn't be required to pay a certain amount in taxes and then pay a fee for this service and a fee for that service and a fee for this service. What are the taxes going for? We have what's called a comprehensive annual financial report that every city and county in the state of Wisconsin has to fill out. I went through that for 2016, and if the city of Racine sold off every asset that it had at its disposal, it would still have $49 million left over as a surplus. For them to say that we don't have it in the budget to lower the taxes is a blatant and bold-faced lie. And I plan to bring that kind of transparency to the citizens of the 8th District and the citizens of the city of Racine.
okay. That too sounds lofty. It sounds high in the sky. But you said earlier you know what to look for. So lowering taxes and increasing what the residents receive, the tax-paying residents receive, looking at the 2016 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, all of that. So pinpoint it. If we sold everything, we still have $49 million. You know what to look for. Where's the problem?
Well, first and foremost, one of the biggest problems is redundancy. You have department heads that, you have 2 department heads that are basically handling one set of services that shouldn't be there. We have a city administrator, and yet we have a full-time mayor. What need has the city of Racine with 75,000 people for a city administrator that rakes in $160,000 a year when we have a full-time mayor who can do everything that that administrator is doing and more? Why does the city of Racine have a municipal court that sucks in almost $400,000 a year from the budget when the county courts in the state of Wisconsin are the courts of original jurisdiction and they can hear any cases brought before them for any kind of municipal violation? Those sensible things, those 2 things right there would save our city nearly $600,000 a year. Then that's just going line by line, item by item. What do we need? What can we afford? What do we need to spend versus what are we spending?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So now, before we ask community questions, we're going to ask that opiate question that I didn't ask last time. So, in our community, we have only one treatment option for addicts, yet opiates are destroying our community. And let me just put a caveat here. This really isn't about opiates. Opiates is just what's out there. It's about all drugs, from the legalization in other states of marijuana to crack, powder cocaine, heroin, you know, meth, everything. What role does the county / the city government have to play in this one-size-fits-all, one treatment program for, one treatment option for addiction for our residents?
Well, that's a huge question. I don't know if we can get that all in 2 minutes.
Well, we can give you another minute. You got 3?
All right, no problem. I think that, first, I think we need to address why do we have a drug problem in the city. And, you know, I think that there are 2 forms of drug abuse. There's the legal drug abuse, which has become very popular because doctors were overprescribing opiates at a record rate. We saw that at the VA. You know, I had neck surgery and my doctor gave me 120 Vicodin. There's no way I needed 120 Vicodin. When someone has that sitting around in their medicine chest, that is a temptation for their children, for visitors, for people that come into their home as contractors. That temptation is there. So I think that's an issue that has to be addressed by the medical community. I think we also have the abuse of alcohol. And alcohol, up until only recently, you had to be arrested, which means you had to get caught, 5 DUIs before you were considered a felon. However, a young black or Hispanic or white youth who gets caught just twice with a joint is considered a felon. So I think we need to decriminalize pot. Now, I'm not saying make it legal, but I think we need to make that a misdemeanor and a money offense and treat it the same way that we do alcohol. I think as far as the opiates are concerned, I think we do need to invest in treatment centers. Simply equipping our police department and our fire department and our schools with Narcan, that's after the horses are out of the barn. We need to have better education in our schools, which is a unified issue. We have to have better rehab programs and prevention programs. That becomes a state and national issue. But I think the city needs to recognize that yes, indeed, it is a problem. And part of the problem with the illicit drug use is the absolute despair that many of the citizens live in the city of Racine. They live in blighted neighborhoods. They live in poverty. They live in broken homes. Many of them are undereducated, underserved, and underemployed. And I think when you give people hope, and they can link their life to a star, that we can slowly start dragging people out of that despair that's causing them to use drugs.
Thank you. And that gives me a follow-up question, because you talked about treatment programs for opiates. I specifically said the other drugs, because most of the people, brown and black people, they don't find themselves as often in opiate addiction. When they are struggling, they find themselves in different kinds of addiction. And oftentimes people start with opiates and then maybe go to another drug because they cannot get the opiates. So for those who have moved from opiates or who didn't even start there, and it's heroin and cocaine and meth and all those other drugs that, that they're struggling with, what's the plan? Do they just get locked up and only the opiate people get out?
Oh, absolutely not. And I think, you know, when I use the term opiate, I understand that fentanyl and crack and heroin and cocaine, you know, there's an entire alphabet of drugs out there that are made available in our communities. And one of the issues that Racine has is that we are that community between the Milwaukee drug trade and the Chicago drug trade. And we are the battleground for the gangs that are supplying those in between. And I think we need to redouble our efforts in order to curtail that traffic of drugs into our community. Now, that is probably best left to the police and sheriff's department to determine how they are going to approach that. But I think we need to provide funding for them to maximize their efforts in taking those drugs off the street and stopping that illicit trade.
Thank you. So you've heard the question, you've heard the response. Go ahead.
Could you repeat the question for me just one more time?
Sure. The question is about opiates. And in our community, we only have one treatment option for opiate addicts, for opiate addiction. And it's destroying our community. So what role does the city / county government play in that? Only one treatment option for those who are addicted.
Well, first and foremost, the city and county have very little at their disposal as far as discretion is concerned when it comes to the legality or criminality of drug use, drug distribution, so on and so forth. It's outlawed at the federal level and it is currently outlawed at the state level. Some cities and counties have made their own ordinances for small amounts, but that's about as far as it goes. We have to look at why were these things outlawed? A lot of people say, well, they were outlawed because, you know, there's such a detriment to the community. Well, we have an example that we can draw on, which is prohibition in the 1920s and the 1930s. So there's no excuse to understand what would happen when you prohibit something that the majority of the population wants at their disposal in one way or another. Because it is prohibited at the federal and state level, that gives an element of danger in possessing it and distributing it, which raises its price. And because it is illegal, those who manufacture it must go underground. There's no assurance of assay, there's no assurance of purity, there's no assurance of what's in that. They could throw in melted aluminum for all we know, because the stuff is illegal and underground. First we have to attack the illegality and criminality of these things before we can even focus our attention on helping those who are hooked on these drugs. When we attack the criminality of this, you will have individuals who come from underground, above ground, and they will assure assay, purity, add buffers, so that the stuff, if people want to indulge in these things, would be safe, and the components that they have would be known. And I think the great majority of the people who are hooked on these strong illegal drugs would no longer be hooked on them, and they probably would be able to afford them like they can afford cigarettes or alcohol, for that matter, beer, what have you. But because it's illegal at the federal level, that's where we have to start to attack this problem. Because our cities did not outlaw these distribution of drugs, distribution of opiates, so on and so forth, we can't really attack it the way that we need to until the federal government and the state government get out of the way, period.
Thank you. I don't have a push question, but do any of you? Yes, sir.
That was a thoughtful point.
Can you speak up, please?
That was thoughtful point on your response to that, but there's another element to drug use that I'm not sure if there's even not just counting the city-wide. What would one of you two or any of you two be willing to advocate to provide toward mental health services?
We'll start here since he answered. Go ahead. What would you provide to mental health services, which is the other piece of the whole drug abuse issue? Okay.
We have a disparity in our society. Those who are the haves can afford to see a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a marriage counselor. They have the wherewithal to do that. Now, whether they choose to or not, that's up to them, but they have that option. Those who live in poverty, number one, may not recognize that there are some mental issues at play, some predisposition to addictions, some abusive behaviors that are driving them into the drug use, and therefore have not addressed it and do not have the wherewithal to just decide one day, well, I think I'm going to go see a psychologist and see if I can't work on this. So I think what we need to do is we need to work with the mental health organizations within the city, at our hospitals, through our health department, and I think we need to look at those that are the highest risk for these mental health issues. Those who are in abusive relationships, those who are, being raised by single family or single parent households, those where there's chronic unemployment, and address those issues and try to nip it in the bud. Now, and I wanted to add this to the comment that he started making about federal and state regulations. Denmark has approached this in a slightly different way. Denmark has looked at drug use not as an illegality where it is strictly a punitive process. You have drugs, you get fined, catch and release. What they do is they treat drug use, illicit drug use, as a social issue. And rather than spending their money on police and sheriffs and prison officials and parole officers, they use the social network or the social support network that's available, and they also make sure that their public restrooms are illuminated with blue light, which prevents people from shooting up in those bathrooms.
Thank you. That's interesting.
I'm not a mental health professional, and I don't have much experience with individuals who have had mental health issues. I would be more inclined to begin talks with mental health providers, mental health clinics, to find out, again, the root of the matter. Why does someone have a penchant for abusing drugs? Why does someone have a penchant for being abusive? Why does someone have a proclivity to go into negative behavior instead of being positively reinforced or positively redirected? I think our treatment needs to begin with the mental health professionals and understand why these things are happening so that we can better treat these individuals. The last thing that the city needs to do is to be punitive toward these individuals, especially if there's an underlying problem that needs to be fixed. Being punitive is basically what I would call quality control, dealing with the problem after the fact, dealing with the horse after he's already got out of the gate, versus quality assurance, looking at the potential failure modes and effects, and realizing what needs to happen to prevent that gate from opening so that the horse gets out in the first place. Making sure that this person who has the proclivity to abuse drugs or be abusive doesn't take that route in the first place. Maybe it has something to do with their self-esteem. Maybe it has something to do with being able to be a business owner or having a job that is self-sustaining or family-sustaining. But we need to look at this from a multifaceted point of view and not just at one little thing. Oh, they're abusing drugs. We need to have penalties. We need to throw them in jail, get them out of the community. Boom, that's it, that's all. We need to look at it from a multifaceted point of view, and we need to invite everyone to the table so that we can get all sorts of perspectives and find things that we may not have seen before or considered before so that we can address this problem and address it effectively.
We're going to get to the community questions in just a second, but I'm going to push. We already know why.
We do?
We know some of the reason why.
Well, some of the reason is not all of the reason, and what we don't know, being outside of what we don't know, that might be the start of the solution.
It may be, but you said you have no experience with people with mental health, and you wouldn't know where to start. And what I would like to suggest to you is, as a person living on the planet, particularly a man of color, you do know where. Drugs offer an escape from some type of pressure. Pressure, oftentimes, that pressure can be a lot of different things. I know oftentimes for people of color, it could be the negative impact, the negative reaction of others who struggle with handling the color of your skin. Or for women, the negative reaction of men who struggle with handling your gender. Finances are a reason. There are reasons that we could all, everybody here could throw a reason out here that we've all heard of. So let's put what we don't know aside. Based on that loose structure, what say you in response to his question about drugs and the impact it has on mental health?
Well, like I said before, it may not be that the drugs are having the impact on the mental health. It could be that the mental health is having the impact leading people to go to drugs. You just said that people will turn to drugs as an escape. Now, I can draw from my personal experience. I'm a man of color. I've never turned to drugs. I'm a single father. I've never turned to alcohol. I've never turned to abusing my children. I've never turned to abusing their mother. I've never turned to abusing anyone in the community. What was my escape? Personally speaking, my escape was the Almighty Father. But not everybody has that knowledge, that wisdom, that wherewithal. And so what I'm speaking of is we need to look at why somebody needs to escape, wants to escape, and understand what we can do to positively reinforce them, redirect them from doing things negatively in the community, negatively against their relatives, negatively against themselves, so that they don't suffer these issues that we see in the community. A one-size-fits-all kind of plan, it only fits the one type of person or group of people who respond well to that. We have to, like I said, we have to look at different aspects and avenues on how to attack and address this issue. And because I am unfamiliar with those things, my first proclivity or the first response that I would have is to turn to those who are experts, who have those experiences, not just those who have the PhD after their name, but individuals who suffered these things and have battled through and have successfully overcome them. How did you overcome this? What did you face? How did you overcome it? And how do you stay on the straight and narrow?
Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to move to the questions that I collected during the break from the community. As I'm asking these questions, I hope you guys are thinking of other questions. We need to press them hard. We got a little bit more time. So, the first question comes from the previous debate. Person asked the same question. Would you support a forensic audit? I gave the definition last time. You two are reasonably intelligent people. You give your definition for your answer. I'll start with you.
Well, I agree with your definition, and I think forensic means that you are doing an audit for the purpose of finding out what's wrong, to look into the details. The city of Racine has a larger budget, more dollars than comparable cities, comparable populations. We have an incredible amount of money that's being spent on an IT department, over $1 million a year. As Malcolm alluded to, we have duplication of offices. We have, and this was a warning from a retired public works director, that when we start using a city administrator, we take the authority and the purpose of the department heads away. And that's precisely what's happened. We are paying department heads who have basically been castrated by having a city administrator. So should we have a independent and comparable, comparative audit done? Absolutely. I think we've seen time and time again where there have been what appear to be a lot of shenanigans, smoke and mirrors on how money has been spent, departments who are not held accountable for the monies that they spend. And you know, we recently had we dipped into our city's reserves in order to provide a salary increase for individuals in order to maintain technical people. And we found out after all this had been said and done, the people that got the raises were the city administrator, the city development director, the Department of the Director of Public Works, and the city attorney. They did not care about maintaining engineers or other qualified individuals. They filled their own pockets.
Thank you. Same question.
Okay, I don't personally have a definition. I'm going with the definition that I get from the dictionary. One being an adjective relating to or denoting the application of scientific methods and techniques to the investigation of crime, and also as a noun, scientific tests or techniques used in connection with the detection of crime. And so I would most definitely be on board with a forensic audit, several forensic audits of the departments, the city as a whole, to find out what criminal activity, if any, has been going on at the city government level, so that it can be fleshed out and people can be more trusting of the government that is supposed to represent them. My work as a quality technician and as a quality engineer in training leads me again to use the scientific method to find out why something is happening, why something has gone wrong, and how to overcome that issue. Scientific method being an observation, a hypothesis, experiments to test that hypothesis, and conclusions based on those tests, okay? I don't think there's much testing that needs to go on. A lot of auditing needs to go on. This is what they said happened, then we need to look at the books. What actually happened? You said that you spent it on this. What did you actually spend it on? Did you do your due diligence to make sure that what you spent it on was the least expensive for the best service that we could provide? Things of that nature, just the simple things. As far as a forensic audit is concerned, I definitely would be on board to support that at the city level so that we can, once again, get people more trusting of their government.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up to this question, sir?
No, no.
Okay. So I'm going to ask one more question, then we'll get to you. Okay. So we're going to switch gears a little bit. First, let me just say this. The city of Milwaukee, they have municipal IDs, which allow the people to get books from the library, go to the doctor, in lieu of all the different things that are shootings that have been happening in the schools with our children. You know, you can use your ID to pick up your children. Racine Unified is moving in that direction, it appears. With that being said, the question from the community is, there is a need for all of our city residents to have to provide ID, a driver's license, to conduct and to access our resources. Are you in favor of issuing a municipal ID? Because for many of our unfortunate residents, they cannot obtain a state ID. So let me paint the picture. I've been picking up my child at 21st Century every day. They know my face, they know me, they know my car, we laugh and talk, tell them about Thanksgiving, Christmas, kid's birthday party, and suddenly, because of a policy, I cannot pick up my child because I don't have what they would deem adequate identification. So, do you support the issuing of municipal IDs?
I do, but I think we have to be very cautious in what the requirements for those IDs are and what liberties those IDs project. I know that there are many in the immigrant community that have issues with not being able to produce a birth certificate, are not able to get a state ID. There are schools that will provide IDs. Driver's license can be issued to a non-national. That happens in Europe all the time. I would support that, but that has to be done at the state level. I think all the schools should be issuing IDs for their students. That's the best way that they can control who is in the school and who is not in the school. And they certainly could issue IDs for the parents and caregivers of those children as well to ensure their security and safety.
Thank you. The response to the question, municipal IDs. What say you?
As far as municipal IDs are concerned, I would not have any issue in supporting it so long as those who would use the program would be the ones to fully fund the program. And so that this program would not be a burden or a hampering on the city, its budget, or any of its expenditures. I don't see an issue with a municipal ID. As Mr. Montey had pointed out, you know, there need to be systems and controls in place to ensure that the individuals who are issued those IDs are who they say they are. And as long as those systems and controls can be implemented, so long as we have an above 95% confidence that the individuals listed on the ID are who they say they are, I don't believe that that would be any kind of issue with the city. It can only help the individuals who would benefit from the program.
Clarify something for me, please. It sounded like you said you wouldn't have a problem supporting it as long as those who use the program fund it. Is that what you're saying?
And what I mean by that is the cost of the program would be paid for out of the fees for the identification cards.
Okay, thank you. You have a question, sir?
Oh, yes. In recent conversations with this is from Malcolm, or in both, really, I got a hint of libertarian and so I want to ask you, what would be your views on a citizen review board that would maybe protect the interests of the ordinary citizen?
So let me ask the question so all can hear. He says that he has a little bit of a libertarian type of vibe in him. With that being said, the question is, how would you feel about a community review board, excuse me, a citizen review board that represented the interests of the citizens? Is that your question,
Yes.
sir? And it was directed at you.
Is that for both of us, or?
Yes.
We're
both.
starting
Oh, you're
with
gonna start with
you,
Okay,
since he said you.
I'd like to ask for some clarification. Citizen review board reviewing what?
Mostly police. I'm looking to replace the model of police and fire commission.
I see.
So the question is directed at replacing the Police and Fire Commission with more of a citizen review board type of situation to help resolve possible issues between the citizens and those said departments, yes? Okay, now.
I would definitely be in favor of such a change from Police and Fire Commission to a Citizen Review Board. I'm not altogether sure whether or not Racine, as a city of the second class, would be able to completely do away with the Police and Fire Commission. I'd have to research that more, but from what I recall, I don't think we could. But if we had a Citizen Review Board, I would be in favor of making sure that the recommendations from the Citizen Review Board be more than advisory, almost compulsory upon the Police and Fire Commission. Because as it stands, the citizens of the city are the ones who pay the salary of the police officers, of the firefighters, and so it would only make sense that the bosses would be the ones to review their employees, so to speak. And if the bosses are not happy with their employees, the bosses should have the authority to change who they employ.
Thank you. Sorry.
I would be totally in favor of that. I see one problem with that is, and that is the apathetic nature of our society. We need to get people that are willing to be involved, that are willing to go to meetings, that are willing to do their homework, and are willing to take a stand. And I think that that's a revolution we need to see in the city of Racine, that the people need to take back their city. Now, I will take that one step further. Not only should we have a Citizens Review Board, I think we need to reverse the advancement of an agenda within the City Hall, which has taken the citizen involvement in the various committees and made them strictly political appointments, patronage positions. We do not have a cross-section of our society represented at the Safety and Licensing Committee, at the Public Works Committee, at the Water and Wastewater Committee, Public Works, Parking and Streets. And the reason that we don't is that it's very easy for someone to appoint someone who donated to their campaign, someone who has the same party initial after their name, or somebody who's a relative or a friend. And I think that these recommendations need to, first of all, come from the community. People need to volunteer. They need to step forward and say, I want to serve on a commission, I want to serve on a committee, I want to serve on a review board. And then the council needs to be cooperative in that measure and bring those recommendations to the council and get more people involved in our process, because bureaucrats now are not elected officials, they are appointees. And that's where you started losing the democracy in our system.
Thank you. So we'll move to the next community question. I have 3 here. And we're going to start with this one. We're just going to keep shifting gears. So since we started with him, he went back to back. We'll start with you this time. How would you stay connected to the community should you be so fortunate to be elected to office?
Well, I think there's many opportunities to stay connected. Number one, I walk my community on a regular basis, all over. I talk to people who are out on their porches. I meet people at restaurants. When I'm patronizing local establishments. Neighborhood Watch is another excellent opportunity to talk to your neighbors, particularly on the issues of crime, because they haven't gotten responses from the incumbent, and they're coming to me. I have a house of prostitution in my neighborhood. I have a drug house in my neighborhood. I've got parking issues. I've got speeding issues. I'm open, and I'm retired, so I can dedicate that time to making sure that I stay in contact with my constituents.
Thank you. So I'm going to press. You said that you would make yourself available, local coffee houses. You talked about the issues that you're aware of and people reaching out to you. Prior to running, how connected were you to the community?
I've always been connected to my community. I've been active in things going on in Racine since I was a child. Started attending council meetings when I was very young. Worked with aldermen, throughout the years with Alderman Kaplan and Alderman Rooney. And it's very important for me to stay engaged with those people. People in my neighborhood know me. I'm in good relationship with all of my neighbors. Again, I regularly patronize the local restaurants, and I'm not one to sit in bars, but the local restaurants and whatever, and I talk to the people that are there. I make myself very open. I ask them what their concerns are, and I'm involved in organizations, within the city. The thing that appalled me the most was recently attending a fundraiser for the Faith, Hope, and Love charity, which is run by the Lejewskis in trying to set up a transitional foster home. And when I go to that event, and there was not a single public official, not a single elected official there, that shows me that they have lost touch with people at the street level.
Thank you. I'll ask you the same question. How will you stay connected to the community if you are so fortunate to be elected?
Malcolm Platt at the door. You're gonna hide from me like you do from, and no offense, Jehovah's Witnesses. I'm not trying to offend any Jehovah's Witnesses, though. I have them in my family. But many of you sitting in the audience have seen me at your door. A lot of people in the community know who I am, not because I'm just involved in all of these lofty different committees or different things like that. I go and shop at Save-A-Lot, on State Street, Memorial Drive. I go to the Walgreens right across the street. I brought my children's mother when we were on speaking terms to the Air store right next to the McDonald's in there. I go down Northwestern Avenue, I go down Spring Street, I've been in the hospital. I'm in the community just as a normal human being. I'm a single dad. I got to get my kids out there. I run into people everywhere in the Walmart, in the Shopco and everything else like that. And people stop me, hey, Malcolm, X, Y, Z, so on and so forth. I used to get in trouble all the time because a 10-minute trip to the store would turn into an hour and a half because I ran into 7 people that I knew. And so the way to stay connected is to be a human being. A human being. And show up. Show up. Show up. That's how you stay connected to your community. You show up. That's how.
Thank you. We're going to give some of you that 2-minute laugh break that you need. Go ahead.
I'm not a comedian, just let you know.
Okay. We have 3 more questions here. So this is gonna be the speed round because I really want to give people some time.
Okay.
And time is running low. It's Friday night. We run a little bit over, okay, but it's not okay with everybody. We see people leaving. So let's boogie. What funding are you prepared to allocate for city supportive services? That's a question from the audience.
For city supported services, if I may clarify that, if we're talking about trash pickup, street lights, recycling, fire department, police department, as needed. When I grew up in this city, our taxes covered our street lights. It paid for the ambulance to come to your home if you needed it. And it paid for your garbage pickup, and it didn't matter if you were putting out 1 can of garbage or if your whole household was sitting at the curb, it was picked up. And we now have elderly in our community that are paying for that ambulance to come to their home. They are being nickeled and dimed. We were promised that recycling would be a program that supported itself, and there would be just a few years of us paying for the receptacle. Trust me, folks, you're paying for that for a lifetime. And now our garbage pickup. They have given us these large, unwieldy garbage cans that even I struggle with in the ice and the snow. Mark my words, your garbage pickup will start going to every other week. They are cutting services. The services are at the expense of a bloated bureaucracy and pet projects for districts other than the 4th district. Folks, I'm putting up with really crappy street conditions in my neighborhood. Lights being turned off, signs that are not being maintained. I think that the services that we first need to provide to the citizens are their health, safety, and well-being, and we need to do that efficiently, effectively, and maintain that level of services.
Thank you. Same question. What funding are you prepared to allocate for city supportive services?
Well, I would like to ask for clarification of that, but I'll just go off of...
Well, 1 second. Clarify.
Supportive services would be like for homeless prevention or poverty aversion, those sorts of things. That's what supportive services.
Then I would like a second chance at that after he answers.
We'll give you the follow-up after. Okay, so supportive services for homeless prevention, things of that nature, yes? Okay, go ahead.
Well, the thing that has really shocked me with the city of Racine, especially in the 8th district, is how many homeless individuals that we have, and yet how many vacant homes we have. One of the things that we could do to prevent homelessness is to look at the program that Milwaukee had. I believe it's the dollar purchase program. We could tweak it to fit our own set of circumstances, but we need to look at unused and unperforming properties to help alleviate homelessness in this city. As far as other supportive services such as public transportation, for instance, we have an over $80 million budget, over half of that going to the police department, if I remember reading that correctly, and yet of the $8.5 million allocated to public transportation, only $500,000 of that actually comes out of our budget. And yet we have individuals at 8 o'clock at night standing on the corner because they missed the last bus going in, and they're not going to get to where they're going. We have Foxconn out in Mount Pleasant on the expressway. We have not one public transportation route that gets them even remotely close to Foxconn. Well, maybe remotely close on I-94 and Highway 20 4 times a day, twice in the morning, twice in the evening. But we need to look at things that the city first needs to and was established to provide to its citizens. Things like transportation, things like city street lighting, things like trash pickup. Like Mr. Montey had said, we need to get back to those basics. We need to run them and run them efficiently, and look at places where we can cut out the waste and the wasteful spending, and then we can allocate more of our dollars to other things without raising taxes and in fact lowering taxes.
Thank you. You have the follow-up now that the question's been clarified?
Good, thank you. I'll tell you, I live next door to a home. Actually, it was a building that was a rundown boarding house. It had basically been condemned by the city. And the pre-apprenticeship program brought together a group of high school students in the summer, taught them how to be carpenters and drywallers and painters and roofers and gutter hangers and porch builders. And that home was turned in, that building was turned into a grand home, and a very nice home. And it was done at a very minimal cost. We have Habitat for Humanity. We have the pre-apprenticeship program. Let's throw this all together one basket. We have got a lot of condemned homes, vacant homes, and abandoned homes in the city of Racine. We don't need to turn them into palaces, but we certainly can make those into comfortable living areas. And I think we can do that by training people in the community, bringing volunteers together, providing them with the resources. We had a group of people that wanted to come in and fix up homes last year in the city of Racine. It was a church group. They come in, they fix porches, they help people, stay in their homes, fix them up, whatever they need to do. And we could not find $10,000 to give them for painting and carpentry supplies. The city is not focusing on a very desperate need. Now, there are homeless people out there that are homeless because of a mental condition. Now, that's a separate issue that needs to be addressed. But we have had a city that has been embattled with the hospitality center, not allowing them to have overnight hours, and we have a lot of empty churches in Racine, and the church people need to step up.
Okay, so it's 8:02, but in lieu of their responses, there's a question that I want to ask. Will you guys permit us another 5 minutes so instead of 8:15, we go to 8:20? Is that permitted? Okay, I have a no here.
Well, those who'd let us stay, let them stay. I say those who'd like to stay, stay.
I am the boss, so I'm asking a question. I am the boss right now. So, with that being said, there are approximately 40,000 homes in Racine. Approximately 4,000 of those homes are in foreclosure. That's about 10% of the homes here. I hear you talking about all of the things we need to do to the homes and this and that, but those homes have back taxes on them, and those taxes have to be paid. So how can we can't just grab a house and rehab it and put some people in it? It sounds good, but because your opponents aren't here, I have to push.
And I appreciate
So
that.
the question is, those homes with those back taxes that are owed on them and all that bureaucracy and red tape that one would have to go through just to get the house. $70,000 of back taxes, then the house, it costs $70,000. So you're 140 grand in and you haven't even changed a light switch cover. How can we get to this utopia you guys are talking about?
Well, what has the city been doing with those non-performing properties? If they haven't been receiving the money, what's wrong with the city for giving the taxes in exchange for the homeowner signing over a quitclaim deed? Your taxes are forgiven, we take the home, we do with it so that it becomes performing. That's just one example of turning these homes over. Then look at programs like I had said before, the dollar purchase program. If a homeowner, or excuse me, someone in the city of Racine, they have a manageable income, they're able to pay rent, they should be able to manage, a monthly stipend per month as far as either repaying any kind of loan that the city may extend to them for rehabilitating the property. If the city could look at $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 that it may take to rehabilitate the property, extend a loan to the new homeowner, they pay the amount that they paid in rent for the loan payments. They have the cash at their disposal and very strict guidelines that the money is to be used to rehabilitate the property and make it performing again. And one caveat is that folded into that loan payment would be a portion that they would pay every month, so that they are paying the assessed property value taxes on that property. A lot of the red tape as far as for
reluctant to take possession of properties that are in arrears on their taxes because it is cheaper for them to pay the reduced tax rate of a distressed property to the city of Racine than it is to go through the entire lien acquisition and foreclosure and auction. So they are reluctant to do that. I think what we need to do is we need to have a cooperative effort between the city of Racine and the county. Here's the deal, folks. The bank is sitting on a property they've already lost their money on. They're not going to get that money back. An empty building freezes in the winter. It leaks. It becomes a home to vandals and vagrants. County, you're sitting on a property that has back taxes. You're going to keep paying property taxes to the city of Racine infinitum if we don't do anything about this. Let's have a cooperative effort, as Malcolm has suggested, that we have these dollar purchases and we help people get into their first new homes, not new homes, but first homes, have them invest where they live. Let's rebuild our communities by having these distressed properties removed from their blighted conditions and turned into family homes.
Thank you.
May I reply to that?
Yes.
Okay, really shortly. Another caveat in the program that I had mentioned, ensuring in the process of turning these properties over to performing properties that whoever purchases the property must reside in the property at least 5 years so as to cut out the propensity of people buying homes or properties at bargain basement prices and then turning into slum landlords.
Thank you. We have 2 more questions from the audience. Excuse me, from the community. We are not an audience, but a community. As you know or should know, there is a lot of controversy and alleged illegal activities surrounding the Machinery Row project. If elected to office, how would you put to rest those allegations and what penalty would you recommend if illegal activity is proven? Do you understand the question?
I do.
Okay, go.
Okay, folks, I've already put myself smack dab in the middle of this controversy. Not only was I the one that stepped up and helped the first tenant who had been evicted go to the State Department of Administration when the city told him he wasn't entitled to any relocation costs, and got a judgment from the State Department of Administration on his behalf telling the city that they didn't need to, as provided for in the state statutes, provide him with relocation and loss. I'm also the one that filed a lawsuit, not a lawsuit, a criminal complaint with the County Sheriff's Department, alleging that Mayor Dickert, Scott Letney, and Tom Friedel used questionable means and in essence committed mortgage fraud by creating I'm at a loss of words here. What the name is? You would pay it if your bank holds your taxes escrow account. They established an escrow account that was supposed to pay for any remediation necessary at the property. Now, you all know if you have an escrow account for your taxes, that pays your taxes. If there's money left over, you get it. If there isn't enough money, you got to chip in. They created this escrow account, basically withheld $10,000 at the very last minute from the sellers and said, we're putting it in the escrow account for property remediation. A very small portion of that was used for actual remediation, a roof repair, and to tear down part of the building. They never returned the balance of those funds to those owners and instead used it to pay the property taxes and to repay the purchaser, Bowman, his expenses in putting options on the property.
Thank you. Same question.
Like someone from the audience had brought up before, a forensic audit, that would be one of the first places to focus a forensic audit on. It looks very criminal. It looks like a lot of shenanigans have been going on with this project, and so I would be in high favor of auditing the actual process and the project of Machinery Row to find out what was done versus what was supposed to be done. And if there are any criminal activities uncovered, I would definitely spearhead the criminal prosecution of all involved. If I can't get those in the Common Council to get with me on those criminal prosecutions, I'll bring the issues to the state and, if necessary, to the federal if we have any kind of standing in federal court.
Thank you. We are down to the last question. Nurses all over the country have dealt with mentally ill people and never had to use lethal force to control persons with mental health issues. Would you support a mental health professional team? Would you support a mental health professional team to be dispatched where police would back down and call the dispatch team? Would you support that team? We'll start with you since you went second.
Well, one of the issues with mental health individuals losing their life or being critically injured by the police in what should have been non-dangerous encounters is the fact that whenever your only tool is something like a hammer, everything looks like a nail to you. And so if you have at your disposal punitive measures, guns, tasers, billy clubs, the way that you're going to handle the situation is based on your training with those tools. Beat them, shock them, shoot them. And so it comes down to training of the police force. They need to understand who it is that they're dealing with and how to deal with them. And if we don't want to spend the money on training the police officers because they have enough to deal with already, then I would definitely be in favor of a mental health team being dispatched in disposing of the situation first and foremost, making sure that the police do back down and only get involved if they are called upon by that team. That makes perfect sense.
Thank you. Same question.
Okay, this is an issue that's very near and dear to my heart. First, because I'm very involved with the autistic community. I have a nephew that's autistic, and I work with the autistic people, Autistic Solutions in Racine. My nephew is a sergeant on the police department, and his son is autistic. And he saw that when there is a mental issue like this, or a developmental issue that prevents those people from interfacing with law enforcement at the same level you and I do, it creates a very tenuous and a very dangerous situation for them. And he set up a protocol system. So if you can identify these certain things, back off, because you're going to escalate that situation until someone gets hurt or killed. I know a friend whose daughter was minding her own business in a city park. She was arrested under the suspicion of using drugs. She wasn't using drugs. She had a little bit of a mental disability, and she did not deal well with confrontation. The police, the sheriff's department, arrested her, threw her in jail, did a drug test, and let her sit there for 3 days waiting for the results of that drug test. She wasn't using any drugs. They released her without letting her family know where she was. That poor little girl, teenager, was so rattled and was so stressed out with this whole confrontation and her fear of authority that she committed suicide. We need to have people with psychological training show up at these situations where it is a mental health confrontation.
Thank you. It is exactly 8:15. Ha. So, I've got 5 extra minutes. Are there any questions that you haven't given me that have come up through this exchange that we've had? Does anybody have any questions? Yes, sir.
With that being said, would any of you two be opposed or in favor of an ordinance that states these interactions between law enforcement and a mentally ill individual? In Florida, it's called the Baker Act. So basically, an individual calls, this is the Baker Act individual. You go, would you guys be in favor of an ordinance?
In favor of that, yes. I would sponsor such an ordinance.
I would co-sponsor that.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other questions from the community? Yes, sir.
Just for information, if you want to get on a board or commission for the city, you go on cityofracine.org, click on government, click on boards and commissions, and there's another click you can go on and volunteer to get in any commission you want.
Thank you, Doug.
Right, it gives the description of all of the commissions and boards. It tells you exactly how many citizens are on each board. Some of those boards are a mix of citizens and those who are already in government. You cannot have a record and apply for these roles. It's not an application process. It's quick questions you just answer. You don't have to have all this experience and this and that. They're looking for citizens, not people to apply for jobs. They're looking for citizens. Okay. So with that being said, it tells you the length of time that you can serve on those boards. And it gives you all the information that you need to know. And it's open to the entire community, citizens of Racine, no felons. If you do have a felon, you can go work with Visioning Wisconsin, is that it? Wisconsin Visioning?
Visioning the Greater Racine.
Help me out, thank you, that's why we're a community. So, with that being said, I have nothing more. I would just like to let you guys go. Yeah.
Closing
Yeah.
statements?
Yes. Closing statements.
You?
Go ahead.
Okay. Just to wrap it up, I just want to bring to your awareness, I'm sure you already see or don't see, what kind of representation that you would have if you voted for the incumbent. You see, the incumbent has been invited to now 2 forums and has failed to show up using, from what I've heard, excuses, a failure to be properly notified. Like I said, I have 2 young children. I'm a single father, and I made it here. My invitation was postmarked on March 12th. I received it March 13th, 10 days before this forum, and I made it here. I made it here. I'm here for those who want to have their concerns and questions answered. That is the type of alderman that you will have in me. That is the type of representation you can expect from me. No matter what we have said this evening, what you see sitting before you, or lack thereof, is what you can expect going forward, depending on who you cast your vote for. Whether you cast your vote for the one who materialized or the one who failed to materialize. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Platt.
You're very welcome.
Mr. Montey.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody again for the opportunity to answer your questions concerning my views and concerns. By nature, I'm fiscally conservative, and I would like to see City Hall once again serve its citizens as was originally intended, to provide for your health, safety, and well-being, to get out of the way of businesses so that entrepreneurs can realize their dreams, create jobs, and stimulate our economy. And I hope that you've heard tonight enough that has convinced you that I'm the best choice for your next alderman. My opponent has had 2 years. Her record speaks for itself. She quit the RDA. She quit attending neighborhood watch meetings. She bragged about winning her first campaign with a knocking on doors. I don't know if I'd brag about that. I think that would be a disgrace. So, but I'm in touch with our community. Do you want the same old at City Hall, or do you want to see positive change, realistic economic development, jobs, proper representation, fair treatment for all, and full transparency? Let me just give you a quick rundown of the charities and organizations in the city that I'm involved with in order to keep my fingers on the pulse of our community. The Racine Interfaith Coalition, its Education Task Force. Now these are organizations that either volunteer for and/or support and/or make donations to and promote. Racine Interfaith Coalition, Education Task Force, Campaign for Black Male Excellence, Autism Solutions, the Faith, Hope, and Love Charity, Veterans Outreach, Goodwill, Salvation Army, and the Hospitality Center. Civic involvement is where your elected officials hear what the city needs, feel what the people want, and can be in touch when they are voting on issues at the city council level. Thank you, and I hope you vote for me on April 3rd.
Thank you. So we have Larrin and Mr. Montey here in District 4 for City Council, and Shakoor and Mr. Platt here for District 8 for City Council. April 3rd, go vote. We don't like what's happening in our country. We can't really change everything on a national scale. We can change it right here locally.
Yes.
All politics
Just like
are local,
that.
folks.
Yes.
That's right. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you
Have a great
very much.
weekend.